Show. Oh, that's weird. I know that was weird. I apologize. Anyway. I just want to make sure this is low enough. I want to be heard. Okay. So, yeah, I was just thinking. People always say that, colorism is a big part of Black community. But I never understand why is it so often that the majority of, Black women who are in the media, like they're actresses or singers, things of that nature, being like Beyonce, Rihanna, Zoe Saldana, Janet Jackson, Halle Berry, Taraji P. Henson, all those women, I don't understand why people always assume that it's colorism that got them where they are when, I mean, like, they are pretty average in complexion, to be completely honest. Yes, they are lighter than average, but not extremely. There's tons and tons and tons of lighter skinned people than them. So, I mean, like, if colorism really existed, I don't understand this. Like, if it existed, how come we don't see even lighter skinned individuals doing better than them? If colorism really was truly the thing that mattered, it would mean that basically people who were lighter than average would be treated better than average complected people, but they would not be treated better than people who are even lighter than them. Actually, really, really light skinned people would even get more benefit. But where is it? How come many of the time we see that these people don't make it as far as, say, someone who was darker than them? So that's what I just don't understand about, colorism. Because I was watching actually a colorism video, and they kept naming like different people, but they always name people who were pretty considerably not the lightest skinned individuals, basically. They show like pictures, etc. People who were not, they weren't the lightest skinned individual. It would go, it would follow what your train of thought is, that it's about skin tone, who would love to take their place. Then there's this whole other problem. Like, so many other experiences that I see with, like, people who complain about colorism that are darker skinned women. They always talk about stuff that, in my opinion, is experienced by everyone. And this is why I never understand it. Because it's like, for example, I was just hearing one person talk about how, my skin tone was compared to the color of feces, or the color of a cockroach, or I was taught that I was seen as aggressive, or seen as in a poor light. They saw them in a more masculine view, basically. And to me, it's like, I don't understand why they just associate it and assumed it was dark skin that made someone like white people say to light skinned like people almost think like white people look at light skinned black people and they think, oh, that's just another white person or something crazy like that. Like obviously, I mean, white people say the same damn thing to lighter skinned black people. I've seen light skinned black people receive racism from white people that was like they were very light skinned. They can experience racism just as much as you. They can have the same statements said to them as you. So I do not understand how you're talking about colorism when the whole fact of racism is colorism because it's the focus on the skin tone. Basically being dark because the average person is white in America. So I don't understand why people always talk about, with, dark skinned women and other people attacking them for being darker skinned. Because I'm like, all the things you're saying you experience seems pretty typical for a black woman to experience, honestly. Oh, hi, pretty brown girl, Ari. Yeah, thanks. But yeah, I just think that sometimes these kind of colorism, colorism stories and things of that nature kind of overshadow thing, but it's kind of like, at least I feel like it's kind of like a pressure to kind of like ignore the experiences of a lot of other black women when we could all kind of come together on this issue and be like, well, yeah, this is a bad experience that a lot of black people experience. Instead, we split it up and we divide it so then it's only a dark skinned black woman's issue. But then of us is just like, well, what we're going through, nobody really talks about because it's like not even really addressed to the same level. And also, I wanted to talk about, I wanted to act like this kind of was, this was not off of a video I watched, honestly. It was more so off of something I was looking at. How do I explain this? So going back to the whole part about the different actresses and singers, things of nature, like Beyonce, Rihanna, Halle Berry, Georgie P. Henson. I find that a lot of people don't really pay attention to two things, especially adding. One, the standard of blackness. A lot of people like to act like the standard of blackness is, on average in America, like long ago, we tried to act like it was, I guess, lighter skin. I don't know because I wasn't around long ago, but that's what I hear. And nowadays, some people like to try and act like the standard is darker skinned black women. But if you really think of the reality of life and what the majority of people are, to me, it's like it makes no sense that most of our actors would be light or dark because the majority of people in America aren't light or dark. So I mean, like when they complain about many of the main actresses with dark skin, you gotta look. They're not, on average, very light skinned either. Which it shows you that obviously it's not really about colors, one, and then also it basically kind of shows the view of black women and black men as a whole, because generally black men and black women aren't usually either way. That's what the middle is, the average, basically. And for me, it makes sense to some extent because a lot of darker, a lot of darker women, like for example, someone like Taraji P. Henson or Halle Berry, could play many differently, and you would perceive them either way. You can perceive them as lighter skinned, you can perceive them as darker skinned, and you can perceive them in the middle. It depends on their skin tone and things of that nature, since they can tan that stuff. So to me, it's and stuff kind of makes sense where that is the way it is. It doesn't seem like it's really a color thing. If it was a thing, lighter skinned women, then that success than them. You Carl Patton. So that's just how I see that, basically. I don't know. To see more of redheads, for example, and redheads, and you see some redheads, they're not the majority of the white community. Therefore, you're not going to see a lot of white redheaded singers or actresses or anything of that nature, you know? So that's why I just think people don't pay attention to certain things, like being a minority or a majority. But I do think that in part, colorism can play a part in this way, where like, and this applies to both sides. This is why with colorism, for example, personally, I have never experienced any form of colorism. And my mother has never experienced any form of colorism. She's darker skinned, honestly, but she's still within the average range. Um, within that average range of, like the typical complexion for a black person, um, are more subject to coloristic comments, in my opinion, against like from other black people. But most of the time, from the dark skinned end of things, it always seems like it's still from dark skinned people, which is the thing that, like, like if it's coming from them, you kind of have to think like something's going on within you guys. But like, I can admit that yes, it's going to be more likely to happen in those cases, just like, like how they had that whole documentary with Oprah, the Oprah network or whatever, where they had light girls and dark girls, something of that nature. And you could hear the light skinned girls, had a certain experience too because they were lighter than average, just like the darker skinned girls did. So, when you are out of the norm, you stick out, and sometimes in a negative way. And that can turn into being a negative experience, and a negative outlook on yourself. But to say, that other black women don't experience this is just odd because like we all experience this from white people in the first place because, to them, like I said, they're going to treat everybody that way. We're all dark. Even someone like Alicia Keys is dark. Tisha Campbell is dark compared to a white person. Don't you hear some white people when they say that they're like tall, dark, and handsome? How dark is he? He's like a lot lighter than anybody that's black. Probably more like Halsey's color, to be completely honest. But I mean, that's why to me it's just people tend to not really pay attention to the fact that but people tend to not pay attention to that fact generally. And I just wish people would actually pay attention to everybody's point of view instead of just a select few and the whole story. Because if you only have one part of the story, you're going to basically have a skewed view of the whole situation. And you're not going to actually get the full picture. I mean, like, if you just like having a biased view and not really actually seeing the whole full situation, um, then I guess that's what you want. But generally, I think a lot of people want the truth. And so, I mean, people have to not just look at one sector of it, but the whole spectrum of it. That's all I have to say on that topic. It's just a few thoughts I had this morning. Thanks for listening, and appreciate it. Great day. Bye.